name is David Reske, CEO of Nowspeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Carmen Williams. Carmen is an evolutionary marketing executive with experience accelerating innovation and growth for startups, mid-sized SaaS companies, e-commerce, and many other technology companies. Carmen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to have me. Thank you.
Nice
to be here.
Thanks for being here. I understand you're working on a book on evolutionary marketing. Can you give us a preview of what it's all about?
Yes, indeed. So it's called Evolve for Growth. And essentially, I was blessed to have come across with this really cool company called Unisys, who discovered the science of evolution in application for business environments. And so that's what it's all about. It's if you understand the science, every living entity is an adaptive environment. You, I am, you are, your business is, and the same science applies. So it's all about using the science to accelerate innovation and growth based on an evolutionary approach.
Wow, powerful concept. I can't wait to read the book when it comes out. We'll talk more about that as we get into our conversation. Nice. But as you know, I like to start these conversations with a Mythbuster question. And the myth that we've been talking about is that great companies get it right the first time. True or not true?
False. Great companies know that you don't always get it right. In fact, usually you don't get it right the first time. So they have that understanding, that evolutionary mindset, that failure is part of learning. And the evolutionary approach is an adaptive approach where you're testing, measuring, evaluating, and then adapting and continuing in that process.
So failure as part of learning is an easy concept to understand, but a very difficult concept to actually emotionally appreciate, because we hate to fail and it can sometimes knock us off our feet. How do companies come back from failure? I mean, you invest. So I think of like, a great company spends a lot of time on strategy and planning and investment. And let's say it doesn't work. How do they come back from that emotionally, financially, and keep going?
Right. Well, so great companies probably don't have to come back from a big failure because they're constantly doing little testing. It's all about, quick and early and agile. So you're not doing some big thing. Does that make sense? So they have that evolutionary mindset, which is, it's not a sudden shift. It's an evolutionary approach. So they're making that mindset right from the get-go, all the way through the process, is about small iterative testing and evaluating, adapting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So evolution, not revolution. You're not reinventing your business model. You're going out with something and then you're testing it, refining it, and evolving it as it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can that be, let's think, one of my favorite examples of a company that's done that incredibly well is a company like Amazon, because Amazon started around the same time I started my first company in 1993 or 1994. They did it a little bit better than I did it, but that's okay. But I was super impressed with like Jeff Bezos' strategy of kind of starting in e-commerce and books, and then evolving to other products, and then starting the Prime concept, and then evolving into AWS and all these other products and services as they went along. I don't know. It's unclear to me if he had that grand vision when he first started with books, but it was a whole series of small evolutionary changes that he made. You see lots of other companies kind of going through that, or do they kind of focus on one big thing and
I think a lot of entrepreneurs get it wrong. So let me talk a little bit about evolutionary approach, evolutionary mindset. There's 4 key criteria. One is that conceptual thinking. So that thinking outside the box, the adding value, problem solving. So the thing with entrepreneurs, that's what they're good at. They have so many ideas. But in addition to that, the strategic intelligence of being able to stay focused and not try to do it all at once, and not getting that sort of, again, that agile test, going out small, testing, adapting, evolving, not getting that mixed up with having great ideas. I don't know if that makes sense, but it takes both of those capabilities, if you will, that focus, in addition that
Yeah.
many entrepreneurs have. Yeah.
Yeah, because and I want to hear the rest of the other two
Yeah.
too. But in my experience, many entrepreneurs like the conceptual thinking, and then but it's hard for them to stay focused on one thing long enough to make it
Right.
really good, really effective, and world class to really win in that
Yes,
category. It's easy to kind of want to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Uh,
exactly.
yeah, but you have to. It sounds like what you're saying is you have to focus on it and then evolve it and make it as effective as it can be to really win in that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the other components for long-term survival, emotional intelligence, ethical intelligence. So focused on the greater good and results, and that adaptive mindset. So the four, I'll just repeat it: conceptual thinking or conceptual intelligence, emotional intelligence. So that is that empathy, being able to put your customer first, everybody first, your employees first. The ethical intelligence, which is focused on the greater good and results, and the adaptability.
So in your experience or what you're thinking about with your book, is it really the CEO that has to have all of those qualities in order for him or her to be successful? Or can they surround themselves with other people who have those qualities? In other words, can you have a CEO who's great with conceptual thinking, but they really don't have very much emotional intelligence? Maybe that's a bad example,
Yeah.
but they can bring people around them that have that and complement the whole team so they've got what they need.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, if an entrepreneur has all of that, then for sure I'd be betting on that entrepreneur. I would say if they recognize, well, even if they recognize their gaps, they've got to make sure, like you say, that they surround themselves with other entities that have those strengths. And so, yeah, I think that the key also, what I've noticed is for a short-term results, it is possible to have an entrepreneur or an entity, a startup that doesn't have maybe strong emotional intelligence, for example, or ethical intelligence, but long-term, an entity must have all of that to succeed and survive long-term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's because you need all of that to adapt and grow.
Yeah.
Um, us talk about like an example of where some of the challenges along the way. So one of the things I've observed in my own experience is you're kind of going out with a new product or service. You got a successful company trying to launch something new and kind of grow and maybe evolve, and you encounter obstacles, right? So the market uptick isn't as fast as you thought. The pricing isn't quite right. The service delivery, the product is not working the way you thought. You're getting complaints. You get all these obstacles. How do you know when to keep evolving and keep making adjustments? And how do you know when to just admit failure and say that didn't work? We need to go in a different direction. Like how do you make those decisions?
Oh boy, that's kind of a hard question to answer, but like where I'm going with that is just, again, obviously you're in business to add value and make money. So that's going to dictate how much money you have to keep trying. But I do think, again, it's proven time and time again in the science that with that iterative, smaller, adjusting, adapting, that's the way to go. So I probably didn't really fully answer your question. So would love to hear your perspective. I know we've talked a lot about evolutionary science. So what do you think when it is to stop and
Well,
admit defeat?
I think the thing you pointed out that's so important is scientific based, fact based adaptation, right? So if you're if you're getting feedback that the product isn't working, are there things that you can iterate and change in small ways to improve that? Can I change training for customer service? Can I change the marketing message?
Yeah.
Because it feels like if you're a company that goes out with the big bang and hey, we got this whole thing, it didn't work, then you're always going to be frustrated.
Yes,
You try out the next thing, that didn't work, that didn't work. But
exactly.
if you can iterate and learn from that and make small changes, then you can potentially fix it and get it into a good place where you can
Yeah,
start making money with it, right? Yeah,
you got it. Yep,
yeah. Is that how you kind of
totally.
companies kind of typically operating, or do you think they're still in the big bang mode
Oh,
trying to?
I think the startups, the entrepreneurs, I think they are getting that. I think that it's rare that I find a startup these days that doesn't understand that. the agile, right? A lot of the startups I'm working with are technology focused, and that's their background, that technology agile mindset. I don't work as often with more traditional businesses, so maybe they're still in that, oh, I got to build the whole store and everything mindset. But yeah, I think that people are starting to get it for sure.
Yeah, but yet there is. I don't want to. So I don't want people to think that they don't have to do any homework up front, and we'll just kind of like go in and figure it out as we go, and we'll adapt and evolve, right? So, what is the role for that upfront work when you are trying to build a new service or a new product or launch a new whatever? What is the role of that upfront work
Yeah.
that you've got to do, whether it's strategy, finance, operations, training,
Well,
before
mhm.
you start iterating?
Well, yeah, the evolutionary approach is having that growth mindset, that evolutionary mindset, which is always learning. So the successful entrepreneurs are doing all of the learning up front. They're talking to people, they're reading, they're looking at what their competition's doing with the market, they're talking, they're doing research up front, talking to customers up front rather than just guessing what the customer wants. So yeah, that of course, all of that is key and necessary.
Yeah. And you talked about the kind of the role of science in this, right? Because we see
Mm-hmm,
obviously the evolutionary concept from Darwin and from others, right?
mm-hmm.
So thinking about the science behind it, how do you see this, business people think about science in that evolutionary mindset? How does that kind of relate?
I mean, I think that when people hear science, they want to close their eyes and have a nap. but but when you explain it more sort of in layman's terms, I think most people are like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. So I think that's what I'm trying to do is with my book, is I'm trying to kind of make it less about science and more applicable and common sense and business minded business thinking. And so I would say all of the folks that I talk to about evolutionary approach are they get it and they're excited to think about it and remind themselves each day as they're operating
Yeah,
to be thinking about it. Mm-hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. One of the other concepts you and I talked about was change, right? So part of the nature of this evolutionary mindset means that you have to be willing to change. You can't just be focused on doing things the same old way or in the way that you have been doing them. So how does kind of a change mindset, and what mindset do you have to be in a
Yeah.
place where you can change and evolve your thinking and your actions?
Yeah. So you cannot grow if you don't change. Like that's just it is what it is. And so and we nobody and we're all I would say coming out of you know your early childhood, you come out afraid of change as you get older. But what I'm learning myself personally in my own journey is that the more you confront change and just tackle it head on, it gets easier. And actually change is becoming, like, for me personally, I'm kind of midlife, it's becoming easier because I just keep pushing myself through. And so change can actually be easy um, once you just get your mind over it.
You think it's I mean, it's almost a cliche that it's easier for younger people to change than older people to change. Do you think that's true? Do people get set in their ways as they get older, or is it possible for older people, and I might put myself in that category, for older
Yeah.
people to think of to kind of create a change mindset in
Yeah.
themselves?
So I think, we're all born probably with a tendency or an aptitude to be evolutionary. But part of it is just lack of awareness. So the more aware you are, the more you can actually work on your ability to be evolutionary. So, I mean, I think out of the gate, kids naturally, of course, when they're young, they're sponges. So they are the pace and the change is easy for them. But I do think that adults, if you're intentional and you have awareness, you actually can be as open to and as evolutionary as young entities.
I think that could be really true. I feel, at this stage in my life, I feel more open to change and than maybe I was in my 30s and 40s, right? So
Yeah.
it, it's part of that. But I like what you said there about the intentionality and the awareness. What does it take in your experience to kind of build those into your life? That intentionality, and maybe we'll talk about both those concepts separately.
Yeah.
So how do you be
Um,
intentional about evolutionary change in your life? What's helpful in that area?
I mean, you have to be open-minded, right? So for me and my journey, because I wasn't where I'm at today, I wasn't here 10 years ago. I had to get hit over the head by an interesting organization. I had to learn about it, and then I had to be open-minded. Because if I had been closed-minded, I just went, oh, that's interesting. Next. So then there's that, okay, well, there's something here, and there's the results, the reward of becoming more open-minded, becoming more growth-minded, becoming more evolutionary. The fruits are there. So I'm going to be intentional. I'm going to think about it every day, and I'm going to try to get better at accepting failure, and because nobody likes that. And so I think it's just really about being open-minded and opening your heart.
Yeah, to different opportunities. Are there any daily habits that help you do that? That kind of make it easier for you to be more open minded or intentional?
Oh gosh, I have teenage kids, so I know that talking to them each day and practicing my open-mindedness with my dialogue with them helps me in my workplace as well, right? Because I get reminded all the time about how my generation thinks differently than their generation. And so you can think about that from a culture, like this country, that country, this person, that person, so for that, I didn't, I don't know if that's a habit, but that's just something that happens all the time for me. I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
absolutely. No, I think that what you're saying is really talking to people that are not like you, whether they're teenage kids or somebody in another culture, can help you be much more open minded and put you in a state of being open to change, and,
Yeah.
and to other opportunities. And that's so important. One of the things that I do is I journal a lot and kind of write down my thoughts. And I also do spend a lot of time planning. I have this whole annual planning process that I go through where I have a vision board, and then I set, long-term goals and annual goals and quarterly goals. I'm a little over the top on goal setting, but that kind of process helps me kind of think about, like, where am I at now? Where do I want to be?
Yeah.
And where, what are the things that I have to do to get there? But one of the traps I think I find myself falling into is I kind of have that vision board stuff set up, but am I really willing to, think differently about that or be open-minded about it? And I guess I would just ask you, what are the pros and cons of kind of being single focused on these things you want in your life and being more open-minded to, well,
Yeah.
maybe I should want those things, or I could want those things, or maybe all these other things that I didn't even know existed that could be out there. How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. So again, you have to have a vision. So having a vision's great. You want to like be clear on your vision, but the how you're getting there, you have to be flexible and open-minded. Because as you know, we're in control of our actions, but we're not in control of everything else. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying, which is being open to how you actually get there is great. And I think, your idea of journaling is good for, I think, who you are. One thing I would say, though, is you never ever arrive. That's my belief. My belief is I'm constantly trying to get better, more loving, just more open-minded, more giving, more evolutionary. But I guess maybe at some point on your deathbed, you might go, gosh, I arrived. I don't know. But I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't look at it as, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to arrive. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're always, growing and changing as long as we want to be, right? I think that
Yes.
sometimes people stop that, and stop, growing and changing. Let's just explore that for a second. What is it? There are people we all know that don't seem to want to grow and change
Mm-hmm.
and continue to evolve to be their best selves. What do you think happens to people that kind of takes them into a direction of not wanting to grow and change, or not wanting to
Yeah.
experience, new things in life? And
So it is from fear, right? So the fear is what holds us back always. And so whenever I see someone who's operating in a way that demonstrates a lack of open-mindedness. I just know they've got deep, deep fear and pain. So I always just try to have more empathy and patience. And just thinking, weaving it back to marketing, it's very applicable. Marketing is probably one of the fastest changing careers you can have. And so you're forced. So I would think about myself. I was a teenager thinking, would I go be a teacher or would I go into kind of PR and marketing? And I ended up going this way. If I was a teacher, there just isn't as much of that force of change. And so here I am, 30 years later, but you're forced to change. But in marketing, if you don't, you're an old dinosaur and you're just not going to have the opportunities and you're not going to have a successful career. So marketers, generally probably are more adaptable than people on average. And certainly the most successful marketers are those that are evolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely right. So if you're right, I love your analogy. So if you're a school teacher, maybe you could afford to develop that Algebra 2 class 30 years ago and kept teaching it through your entire career. But in marketing, you really can't do that. It's going to grow and change. What are we dealing with this year? Chat GPT, and now we're thinking about threads, and what's happening with that. So, there's always something new. So the survivors, the successful ones in our industry, are the ones that are going to grow and change and evolve.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so what do you do if you have that fear, and how do you overcome that fear of change in order to kind of get yourself back into an evolutionary mindset? Maybe you've been burned before, maybe you've been hurt, maybe you lost your job, maybe you were, fired, you did something wrong. There's often legitimate reasons for fear because we were hurt. So how do you kind of get past that to try something new?
Well, so early in my, I think it was actually early 30s, I learned a lot about phobias. And they say, like, if you have a spider phobia or fear of flying, the way that you overcome it, the way they cure people is to put them in a room of spiders or get them on an airplane. I always remember that. And that's kind of like everybody has fears, right? Like, so even, believe it or not, like speaking on this webinar, it's not my comfort zone. And I'm trying to do more of this. And so you just got to force yourself, because actually it gets easier. And then you eventually start to realize, I'm pretty good at this. So that's the way to do it, is just to face it. Face your fear, maybe do a little preparation and kind of do your homework, right? Kind of get out there and do your best. It's a concept I think about a lot. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to do our best. So kind of preparing, doing your best, kind of getting out there. But then, as you said, get past it, put yourself into a position where you might be a little uncomfortable, face your fear, and then get past it, right? Because unless you do that, you're not going to be able to evolve and grow. Right. Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Carmen. So you're clearly done a lot of thinking, and this feels like it's a core of how you do marketing and how you work with clients. If someone wants to get in contact with you, maybe learn more about your upcoming book or how they can work with you personally, how would they do that? I've launched a new blog, evolutionarymindset.org. That's where I do a monthly blog post and share, things about this topic and my book, etc. So would love it if you check it out. Awesome. And we'll put a link to it in this podcast. Well, thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.